When we think of Benjamin Franklin, our minds usually jump to the famous stuff, right? The kite, the key, the lightning bolt. But the inventor we all know and love, well, he was first a young man who had to invent himself. So let's dive into how the Ben Franklin we think we know actually came to be.
It's a pretty wild question, isn't it? I mean, Franklin's formal education was over and done with by the time he was just 10 years old. So his journey from these really humble beginnings to becoming a global icon is honestly a masterclass in self-improvement and, frankly, in challenging how things were supposed to be done.
Okay, so our story starts way back in early 18th century Boston. Ben was the 10th son of a candle maker, a guy named Josiah Franklin. And from a super young age, it was obvious this kid was something special. He was reading by age 5 and writing by 7. And because of that, his father had a very specific and what he thought was a very important plan for him. So his life basically had this clear fork in the road. His dad, a devout Puritan, saw Ben's smarts and decided to dedicate him to the church, which back then was the highest calling you could imagine. Ben gets sent to Latin school, and of course, he crushes it, rises right to the top of his class. But his father noticed something really important. Ben just didn't have the personality, the disposition of a minister. So Josiah pulls him from school after only 1 year. But here's the thing, Ben's real education was just getting started. He starts working in his father's smelly candle shop, but he's spending every spare moment, every single penny he can get his hands on books. He wasn't being driven by a teacher or a curriculum, he was totally driven by his own endless curiosity. And this mindset, you can see it perfectly in this great little story about how he learned to swim. He didn't just learn the basics, he wanted to perfect it. So first he reads a book on it. Then he immediately starts experimenting, inventing his own hand paddles and fins to go faster. He even figured out how to use a kite to pull himself all the way across a pond. This wasn't just a kid messing around. This was the scientific method in action. Observe, hypothesize, invent, and improve.
This inventive spirit definitely carried over into his teenage years. When he was 12, Ben was apprenticed to his older brother, James, who was a printer. Now, James was a really strict boss, and their relationship was, well, let's just say it was difficult.
So Ben knew his brother would never publish anything he wrote. So what does he do? He gets creative. He invents a secret identity, a sharp-witted, middle-aged widow named Silence Dogood. He'd write these hilarious, insightful letters and slip them under the print shop door in the middle of the night. And they were an instant sensation. Everybody in Boston was buzzing about them, trying to figure out who this brilliant mystery woman was. Well, you can imagine what happened when James found out that the celebrated author everyone was praising was actually his own teenage brother. He was furious. The fighting got worse and worse until, at 17, Ben just had enough. He broke his apprenticeship contract, which was a really serious crime back then, and he ran away to Philadelphia to try and make it on his own. So after he finds some success in Philadelphia, Ben goes back to Boston for a visit. He's feeling pretty good about himself, But then the famous minister Cotton Mather gives him a piece of advice he never ever forgot. As Ben literally hits his head on a low beam in a doorway, Mather tells him to stoop, to practice a bit of humility. And from that, Franklin learned a huge lesson, that ambition works a lot better when it's balanced with some tactical humility. Franklin's journey then takes this absolutely wild, unexpected turn. The governor of Pennsylvania is so impressed with this young guy that he promises to set him up in his own print shop. He tells him to go to London to buy all the equipment, but when Ben gets there, he finds out the governor's letters of credit were completely worthless, total empty promises. So here he is, just 18 years old, all alone and flat broke in London. But this total disaster actually turns into a huge opportunity. While he's working at a print shop in London to survive, he gets exposed to all these new Enlightenment ideas. And he starts to shift away from the super strict Puritan faith he grew up with towards deism. This idea that you could understand the world and even God through logic, reason, and science, not just by accepting old doctrines without question. This was a time of massive intellectual growth for him. And on that long sea voyage back home to America, a 20-year-old Franklin sits down and basically creates a personal code of conduct, a plan for his life. This wasn't a religious thing. It was a practical roadmap for how to be successful and live a good life, all based on reason and hard work. So when Franklin gets back to Philadelphia, he's not just a printer anymore. He is a man with a crystal clear vision and a set of guiding principles. He was ready to build something much bigger than just a business. He was ready to build a community. And one of his first and most brilliant creations was this club called the Junto, or the Leather Apron Club.
You can think of it like a mastermind group for ambitious young craftsmen and tradesmen. They'd get together to debate philosophy, talk about business, and come up with projects to improve not just themselves, but their entire city.
And the ideas that came out of the junto, all fueled by Franklin's own success with things like Poor Richard's Almanac, completely transformed Philadelphia. He spearheaded projects that seem so normal to us now, but were totally revolutionary back then. The first subscription library, a volunteer fire department, and eventually his biggest idea yet, a whole new kind of school.
This is really where it all comes together. All of Franklin's life experiences, his passion for learning on his own terms, his belief in practical skills, his dedication to making his community better, it all culminates in this one big idea. He proposed a new academy for the youth of Pennsylvania.
I mean, just look at the difference between his vision and what already existed. It was night and day. The big schools at the time, like Harvard, were basically designed to train ministers. They focused on theology and ancient languages. Franklin's Academy, it was designed to create useful, productive citizens. The curriculum was all about practical skills people could actually use to build a career and, you guessed it, improve their community.
At its core, Franklin believed the whole point of education wasn't just to save your soul for the next life. It was to make you a better, more successful, and more useful member of society in this life. It was a radical idea, focusing on what he called earthly virtues, things like industry, frugality, and reason. And that kind of leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? Franklin's entire life was this quest to learn what was useful, what was practical, what was beneficial, not just for him, but for everyone around him. And he built an entire philosophy of education on that idea. It really makes you wonder, all these years later, how well does our own education live up to that standard?